To Frankie. That's me. Keep up? What?
The episode begins with the Fantastic Four going out for dinner, which quickly turns into signing autographs for their fans. Thing criticizes Susan for her brilliant idea, which was worse than putting curtains on the Fantasticar. Susan explains how she thought this would help Johnny overcome his funk after losing Crystal. Johnny continues to be apathetic, even when the sexy brunette Frankie asks for his signature. Thing comments that Johnny must be crazy if he doesn't notice a pretty girl like that. Susan notices that Thing got distracted by cute girls and asks him how Alicia has been. Thing claims it's been good between them and quickly changes the subject, suggesting they eat. Frankie tells Johnny that she has been reading about him all the time and thought it must be incredible soaring up there in the clouds like that. When Johnny looked up to hand her the autograph, he was quickly smitten by her beauty. She thanks him by kissing him when Frankie suddenly feels queasy and loses her balance. Suddenly, she burst into flames just like the Human Torch, much to everyone's shock. Thing pulls Johnny and asks him what he did to her, but he claims he didn't do anything. Frankie was surprised that she didn't feel anything and was so thrilled that she started flying in circles and then flew outside. Johnny bursts into flames and chases after her all over Manhattan. Frankie flies to outer space and asks him to catch her if he can. Johnny warns her not to fly too high when suddenly her flames get extinguished and she falls back to Earth. Johnny catches her and explains that at those heights, the atmosphere is too thin to support her flames, hence why she got snuffed out. Frankie is relieved that it wasn't anything serious, but Johnny argues that her whole transformation is urgent. He suggests they fly back to Reed's lab to run some tests and get her some fireproof clothes, to which she complies. Reed discovers the cause of Frankie's inflammatory transmogrification using the hypnoscanner. He claims to have also found a significant repressed memory from when she was 6 years old. Frankie quickly recognizes it as her stepfather's lab, which she was told never to go into. They discovered that young Frankie had gone into the lab and, in the process, discovered that her stepfather was involved in chemical research aimed at creating an android human torch for the military. Young Frankie was touching everything when she inadvertently spilled a chemical all over her, and the lab quickly caught fire. Susan was horrified seeing a little girl burning, but Reed claims that she appears to be all right. Young Frankie wasn't hurt, and her young mind blotted out the traumatic incident from her memories. Frankie suspects that her young body absorbed whatever chemical she spilled on herself. Reed claims that contact with Johnny provided the catalyst necessary to activate the dormant molecular instability in her. Frankie states that it's funny, but ever since she was little, she has always known that she was destined for something special. Excited for her newfound powers, Frankie asks Johnny to fly with her and teach her some of the killer moves he has, to which he agrees, and the two lovebirds quickly leave the nest. Thing claims that he is happy to see Johnny move past the heartbreak, to which Reed comments that they may soon be changing their name to the Fantastic Five. Susan is skeptical, worried that Johnny is just rebounding from one heartache to another. Together, Frankie and Johnny made a fire trail in the shape of a heart. Frankie comments that they are just like the song, but before she can sing the chorus, Johnny quickly kisses her. Suddenly, an ominous being from another galaxy arrives on Earth and quickly takes a shot at Johnny and Frankie. They were able to dodge his attacks, but the alien invader headed straight for the Baxter building and destroyed Reed's lab. Reed, Susan, and Thing survived the attack, to which the invader demanded they bow and humble themselves before the might of Terrax. When Thing is making fun of him, Reed explains that Terrax is Galactus's new herald. Reed claims that Terrax replaced the Silver Surfer and that he and Thor encountered him once before. Thing is unimpressed, picks up debris and throws it at Terrax. Terrax tosses it back at him, claiming that he commands all soil and rock, nearly throwing him off the building. Johnny and Frankie fly around Terrax, creating a fire spin to stop him. Terrax hits Johnny from behind, and Frankie catches him when he nearly falls to the ground. Terrax then attacks Reed and Susan, but she creates an invisible barrier around them to block his attacks. He orders them to surrender, claiming that his body courses with cosmic power bestowed upon him by Galactus himself. Thing sneaks up from behind him and delivers a heavy punch, which sends Terrax flying through walls and past buildings. Growing tired, Terrax decides to show everyone his power by pulling the entire city of Manhattan from the ground and lifting it into the air. Reed asks Susan to create a force field around the whole city, worried that Terrax might take it into space. Although she managed to put a force field, Susan doesn't know for how long she can sustain it. Terrax orders them to obey him, or the entire city perishes. Still, Reed tells him that one city doesn't matter if he's led Galactus to devour the whole planet. Terrax explains that he is no longer Galactus's herald. In all the universes, only they have defeated Galactus in battle. For that very reason, he orders them to battle him again, and this time, they must finish him once and for all. Frankie suddenly states that Galactus is coming. They wonder how she knew, and Frankie explains that she just felt it. That said, Terrax sends Reed, Johnny, Frankie, and Thing to Galactus's ship, and orders them to destroy the Devourer of Planets for good. Reed claims they have no choice, as millions of lives are at stake, and Susan won't be able to sustain the force field for long. Reed and the others headed straight for Galactus's ship, where they met the big man himself. Galactus claims that he has been waiting for them, to which Reed explains that he must have also known that Terrax sent them. Thing wonders why Terrax is scheming to have him destroyed, so Galactus shows them the events that led to this point. When the Silver Surfer left to protect Earth, Galactus searched the galaxy for a herald devoid of any and all morality. He came upon Tyros, a bloodthirsty tyrant in his world and described to be without morals, or guilt. Galactus chose him and imbued Tyros with cosmic power, transforming him into his new herald, Terrax. Terrax laughed as Galactus devoured his planet, his people, and even his own family. He was even happy to find new life-sustaining worlds to feed Galactus's hunger. It didn't take long for him to be dissatisfied with being a servant, that he wanted to become a king. Despite that, Terrax continues to serve him faithfully until he discovers Antos, a planet that is seething with anti-life. It was a planet whose very life essence was corrupted by pollution and radioactivity. Terrax sought to poison him with it, to which he was weakened but didn't die. He fled to Earth to escape Galactus' wrath and has now sought their help in destroying him. Terrax checks the ship and discovers there has been no fighting, quickly assuming that Galactus must be too weak to fight. He breaks inside and plans on finishing this himself. When Terrax attempts to strike Galactus, Frankie bursts into flame and attacks him. Johnny asks her what she was doing, to which Frankie explains that she couldn't help it, as she couldn't let Terrax destroy Galactus. Terrax attacks Frankie and hits her, which undoes her transformation. Johnny catches her, but, in a fit of rage, attacks Terrax in her stead. Reed notices that Galactus is absorbing Terrax's energy, and every time he uses his power, it only makes him stronger. Thing suspects that Galactus has kept them alive to lure Terrax into a fight. Thing joins Johnny and attacks Terrax together, but he fights back and sends Thing flying against the wall. Frankie and Reed join them and attack Terrax from all directions. When they finally force him on his knees, Galactus stands up and ends it. Terrax was surprised, thinking that Galactus was already weak and dying. Galactus claims that cosmic power is his to bestow and his to reclaim. Terrax attacks him, but Galactus turns it against him. sending him back to the ground. For their help, Galactus fixes what Terrax has done, returning Manhattan to the ground and returning it to how it was. Galactus claims that the scale is again in balance when he suddenly feels the effects of what Terrax did. He explains that the poison of Antos has overtaken him sooner than he expected. He claims that to survive, Galactus has no choice but to feed on Earth. Thing tries to fight back, but Galactus traps him inside a bubble. Susan pleads with him, but Galactus traps all of them inside bubbles, claiming that he must do what he must. Suddenly, Thor arrives and attacks Galactus with a powerful jolt of electricity that sends him flying and freeing the others. Johnny and Thor work together, and they land a powerful blow on Galactus, which sends him crashing to the ground. When they check on him, Frankie explains that Galactus is still alive, to which it hits Thor and sends him flying against the building. Reed tells them they need to keep Galactus away from his converter, so Reed restrains him with his stretchable body while Susan tries to bind his legs. Galactus easily breaks free, to which Reed claims that, even weakened, Galactus is more than they can handle. Out of nowhere, Ghost Rider shows up, claiming to have been summoned when innocent blood is shed, and Galactus has shed so much innocent blood. Reed claims he thought Ghost Rider was only a myth, but is surprised to see him in the flesh before his very eyes. Ghost Rider asks Galactus if he is prepared to face the agony of everyone he has slain. Galactus is unafraid and tells him to be gone, claiming to have no time for games. Ghost Rider declares that this is no game and immediately attacks him with the penance stare, forcing Galactus to experience all the pain and suffering he caused. He makes him feel the torment of a billion extinguished souls and experience the pain of eternal guilt. Galactus couldn't handle it and passed out. Ghost Rider claims that his task is done and leaves him to the Fantastic Four. With the Devourer of Planets defeated, Johnny notices that Galactus is shrinking, to which Thor claims that he is feeding on his own body to survive. Reed states that Galactus is finally dying, but Frankie refuses and tells them to save him. She explains that Galactus isn't evil and that he is simply a force of nature. She claims that Galactus deserves their help as much as any living creature. Reed agrees and declares that Galactus must live, which shocked Thing. Thor respects Reed's decision and uses Mjolnir to buy them time to think about what to do to save him. Reed explains that he has monitored several uninhabited planets in the Landis sector with the essence that Galactus needs. Unfortunately, he has no way to pinpoint their exact location, and Galactus no longer has a herald to search for them. Frankie asks Galactus to spare Earth, and in exchange, she will become his new herald. Susan asks her if she knows what she's asking, but Frankie has already made up her mind. Johnny asks her what will happen to them, but Frankie explains that his destiny is with Crystal, while hers is with Galactus. Frankie claims that she has always known it deep in her soul. Galactus recovers with the newfound energy and accepts Frankie's offer. He then bestows upon her cosmic power and transforms into Nova, the new herald of Galactus. Frankie flies into space, but Johnny refuses to let her go and chases after her. Unfortunately, he couldn't keep up with her, and the air was starting to thin, making it difficult for him to maintain his form. He eventually accepts her fate and bids her goodbye. Meanwhile, Galactus is grateful to Reed for saving his life when it would have been easier to do otherwise. To reward his actions, Galactus willingly renews his pledge to spare Earth. He claims that, as nowhere else in the limitless cosmos, he might have found those he might dare to call friends. That said, Galactus returns to space with Nova in search of other planets that may satisfy his hunger. Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos, and subscribe and tap the bell to be notified about our latest videos. See you next time.